Hello and good evening. Welcome to today's edition of Politics 101 on a Tuesday evening, starting a couple of minutes late. Please blame Mark Benshop, who called me at 5 minutes to 7 and caused me to come on to the program 2 minutes late. I told him I'm going to tell you all he is the cause. Anyhow, here we are. Here we are. Welcome. Like to welcome all of you, wherever you're joining from, whether it's in Guyana or in the wider Caribbean, North America, Europe, those of you on the South American continent. And I know some of you are joining us from as far as Africa. Lots of stuff going on around the world. You all know that the coup there in Niger or Niger, whichever one of the pronunciations you use, has been catching world attention. And some people are saying there's some lessons there for us here in Guyana. But welcome to all of you. Welcome to all of you. We are winding our way through August, Emancipation Month. Tomorrow night, there'll be that activity in Buxton, the annual UC Guyana Emancipation Symposium on racial equality, centering racial equality in the age of oil. And we have a big cast going to Buxton there. I think Nigel Hughes is going to be there, Nigel London, GHK Lal is going to be there. Roysdale Ford is going to be there. Roysdale Ford, Simona Brooms is going to be there, and I know somebody's name I am missing, but there is that there on Thursday evening, and then on Sunday, Coffee 250 will be having their forum at the Critchlow Labour College, and they will be discussing the one-sided Guyana in the one Guyana, or one-sided Guyana in the one Guyana. And they have some speakers over there. I think Nigel Hughes will be on that panel too. Paul Slow would be on. Don Cush will be on that panel. So we have a busy couple of days coming up with discussions around emancipation. So I know for those of you who are overseas or far away from Georgetown, both events will be streamed live, so you will get a chance to participate. But those of you who are in Buxton or around Buxton on the East Coast, Georgetown, please travel up there to Buxton on Thursday. It starts at 6:30. And let's get moving with the discussion. Last evening, of course, we kicked off our week here with the discussion of that new so-called Black organization that was launched on the weekend. And we are going to be talking a little bit about that tonight. But tonight we have Henry Jeffrey, Dr. Jeffrey, and we are going to center our discussion around 3 years after the government of Guyana, the present government. Some of you would rather use the term installed when they came to office. But 3 years later, where are we? And there was an editorial in the Stabrook News that analyzed the 3 years of the PPP in office, and it was a scathing scorecard. I noticed some of the PPP people are scampering around trying to refute the points made by the Stabrook News. And I think the Stabrook News editorial is important because it's coming from Stabrook News. Because remember, Stabrook News was part of the group of civil society organizations that took a hard line against the coalition, charging the coalition with attempting to rig the elections, in a sense, agreeing with the PPP's narrative of that election. And the Stabrook News has not spent any time over the last 3 years talking about the findings of the recount as another aspect of the narrative of the 2020 elections. So, in a sense, one can argue that the Stabrook News was part of what some have referred to as regime change. And the fact that they have that scathing assessment of what has transpired in the last 3 years is instructive. The government of Guyana cannot say this is the opposition, although, if you read the Stabrook News editorial, it will sound as though it was coming from Aubrey Norton or somebody in the opposition, in the sense that I think organizations like the Stabrook News have come around to the understanding that we are in trouble as far as governance is concerned. In yesterday's newspaper, Henry Jeffrey wrote a letter discussing the nature of the regime in Guyana and kind of making an analysis, making a comparison with Israel. And those of you who've been following what's going on there in Israel would know that there is a really serious challenge to the democratic state in Israel. Although that democratic state in Israel is democratic within the context of discrimination and marginalization of the Arab minority in Israel. And I noticed Ralph Ramkoran also weighed in on the issue over the weekend. So let's bring in Henry Jeffrey and let's get started with our discussion. Henry, good evening.
Good evening, David. How are you? Good?
Well, yes, it's,
Okay.
emancipation, so we've been quite busy trying to do some stuff. We had to be pushing back and so on. And in Buxton, we had our thing on the 31st. And we got calls from the Prime Minister office informing us that the Prime Minister was coming and that he would be the last speaker. He wasn't invited on the afternoon. And I had to be dealing with them, and we had to push back and tell them, no, that's not how it works. But if he were to come, I was willing to donate 5 minutes of my time on this thing for him to bring remarks. He didn't show up. But I went to Belladrum. And when I got there to Belladrum the next day, on the 1st, the Minister of Public Service, Sonia Parag, she invited herself and was there, and the people in Belladrum were angry because she wasn't invited, but she showed up and so on and so forth. And we understand attempts were made to impose themselves on these activities throughout the country. You have popularized the description, domination, to describe the PPP. It's not a new term, but you've popularized it in these times. Um, is that part of the whole thing of domination, attempting on a day like Emancipation Day to impose yourselves on these observances?
Well, David, PPP's domination will not end. It will not end. The PPP, and for the PPP, because the PPP is essentially an ethnic party. It's like the PNC. It gets its vote from essentially from Indian population. It's essentially an ethnic party, and it wants to dominate the political space. Today, as I said in that article, it's a substantial minority party, but it still wants to dominate the political space. Now, to do so, it will have to subvert the other groups, and it has been attempting to do so for the longest while. I mean, I wrote that thing maybe in 2010. I saw it. That is essentially what the PPP intends to do. And you mentioned the Starbucks News editorial. Yes, the editorial was, but let me go back a little bit. I always said there is a thing called substantive and peripheral critiques. And from my standpoint, for instance, they, from what I will call the less substantive or peripheral critique, they spoke to the criticism, to its management of the oil sector. They spoke about the entire thing about what's happening in the courts. It seemed to be more on Exxon's side than on the side of the people. They spoke to all the issues of Madia, the school, and all of that. But you realize that the PPP, the Starbucks News, they told us it would be given, if because of its spending on roads and things like that, it will get high commendation for governance. You know, it's go read the editorial. Now, everything it says before, it's about, it should get no commendation for anything. But they said it will get commendation for governance. And 5 words after, they says, oh, but they're giving contracts to anybody they want to give and all that sort of thing. How do you get contract for commendation for governance, or expect commendation for governance and do those sort of thing? But the editorial says just that. And then when they stop, now flush, they says. And that's what I'm saying. You got to look, when you're reading these things, I believe you got to look for the substantive critique. The substantive critique for me is the one that can use to lead to regime change or call for regime change. When you say government gonna have commendation, and then you say flush with oil money and democratic credentials. They said the PPP has democratic credentials. Where is this democratic credentials? From a regime that's been doing everything possible not to get the courts to look at the case. To this day, the regime is not properly in authority. Where is this democratic credential that the government has? And when you come down to when you get to the when it's now must speak to what should come and what should happen, it says something to the effect, will the PPP government be prepared to be accountable? The question is never whether or not the PPP government would be prepared to be accountable. The question must be whether or not the question is about the system. The question is about the system of governance. This system, it's not for the PPP or the PNCB to be prepared to be accountable. The system of governance allow these parties to do what they like. And therefore, what the editorial should have been doing at the end there is saying the system needs changing. It's the system that needs changing. You can't talk about whether or not the PPP is prepared to be accountable. This is not a matter for the government to become accountable, be prepared. In any system of governance, if you are not accountable, the people can get rid of you. In Guyana, the people can't because of ethnic, for the most part, can't because of ethnic voting. And now we got massive electoral manipulations. So it is difficult for the people to do that. And even if they could do that, you see, even for instance, let's say the PNC can go and win an election now, because the PPP wouldn't lose any vote for all these things they've been talking about, the critique of the environment protection and all that, the Amerindians and all. PPP not going to lose any ethnic votes. But so let us see what happens now. If the PPP, if the PNC goes and win an election by another 1 or 2 seats, because that's what it will turn out, it's something like that. So what happens to the entire Indian population that stands outside of there? You remember, you're not a homogeneous country. We are not all Black people, so you're going to say it's all Black people. You have groups, and therefore you will have 40% of Indians out there. Like presently, you have 40%, nearly, well, we can say 50 because of how the voting went. Half and half people out there that are alienated. The question is the system. So when I look at the editorial, I said, in the less substantive issues, in terms of actual voting and power, they criticize the PPP. But when you come to the most substantive issue as to whether or not there's governance and whether or not there's democracy, they have democratic credential, and whether or not they need to change of the system you have is the government will be prepared to be, to be accountable. So remember, I never bothered with those things because that is the normal thing you hear all the time. And although you call it scathing, it would be scathing in a homogeneous society where you have a united public opinion. If you have a 60% public opinion or 70% public opinion there, even if how it divides, it would be scathing. But it's not particularly scathing in the context of Guyana, where there is no sensible public opinion. What needs to happen, and that's why I didn't bother. I didn't really worry with that bit. It's to you, you said this is the thing of the game, and so I went back and read. And I saw that, but if you notice what I was talking about Israel. Now, to make things worse, they go to Israel, almost to point to Israel as an holistic democratic experiment. Israel is not an holistic democratic experiment. The Arabs are catching all sorts of things down there. The Israeli state has been now defined, as I said in my article, as a Jewish state. So why would you even go to Israel?
Yeah.
When essentially anything meaningful happening there is among the Israelis themselves? Yeah, and that's why I point to it. I said, Israel is not a holistic democratic state. We should not be saying anything about Israel and all of that, to almost selling Israel, and as Professor Smoore calls it, an ethnic democracy. Israel is an ethnic democracy. That is what the PPP want, essentially, to have people to accept that these countries, and you got to accept that these countries are difficult to rule according to British kinds of a system, a Westminster type system. It's very, very, very difficult to rule. And when you are difficult to rule, people just the powers that be tend to leave you and say, man, let it try there and whatsoever there is. Look, it happened in Fiji, both Banzarama in Fiji for a long time. It happened here, Bornum, and the communist era sort of clouded that. But in 1992, you were back on track with the same ethnic problems. So effectively, but what we have now, as I ended by saying, is that you have the world divided now between autocracy and democracy. You have an America that was intricately involved in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and the Good Friday Agreement, which brought together warring tribes, warring worse than us, but be killing one another. And Biden himself was very, very, very prominent in that arrangement. And then you have here now a situation where the first act in 2020, the first human rights, it's human rights, I think so, report says, change the system. Change it from a winner-take-all political system. Call upon the political elites here to change the system. So when the PPP run, the PPP can't go running around saying Guyana is difficult to manage and all that, and hope that anybody's going to take it on to say, all right, it's like Israel, they got kind of democracy. It's not a real democracy. Because you can have a real democracy here if you're prepared to change the system from a winner-takes-all one. And that is the central issue. And that is why I didn't pay too much mind with this topic, news editorials. You bring it on the agenda.
Henry Jeffrey there, making that crisp analysis. And I do agree with him that it was a minimalist critique of the PPP government. And most of the editorial was spent on criticizing the PPP on the question of oil and the environment and so forth, and not on the question of governance. And I always say Stabrook News and some of the others are caught in that thing that they set up for themselves after the 2020 elections, because they legitimized this PPP government and they have silenced the findings of the recount, which, if put into the mix, would question the PPP's democratic credentials. And then everything falls apart from there. They ended by calling on civil society, Henry. What do you make of that?
But there's no civil society. There's not a united public opinion. There's not a united civil society. The civil society is as divided as the political society, because we are ethnically mobilized in this place. So you can call on civil society. All you're gonna maybe, because I have a feeling that, well, not I have a feeling, I'm almost certain that the African people might be the one to be on the street going a thing against the PPP. I ain't gonna see many Indians doing that. So where is the civil society? Which civil society are you calling on? Which? You had a little water something in Georgetown there, and then what it was, some business people and so on. You're not going to see any massive move from the Indian population against the PPP. And unless you say you can see that, what is the point? What is the point of it all? Yeah, the Africans going to be out there. They are about, when I say African, I'm talking about ethnicity. So they must be nearly 50% of the population too. But so they are going to be out there fighting a battle. And it's going to boil down to ethnicity and race and quarrel about race again. There is no civil society.
There is no civil society. Your own assessment of the 3 years of the PPP government. First of all, let's start with the way they have managed the economy, because the Stabrook News spent a lot of time on that. What about the management of the economy that gives one some optimism that we can have a governance of the economy that makes sense?
But how they manage this society as a whole. It's not just them economy. The PPP wants all aspects of this society beyond its control. So you don't matter where you go. You go to the education sector is the same thing. They will say they have had a commission. They're going to choose the commission, but for the oil industry, it's still not there. You got to understand it. I think that I have so long noticed that what the PPP wants to do, it is set upon creating the kind of political economic environment that will undermine African prosperity, because its job is to push Africans into its ranks. It wants African into its ranks. And you're seeing what it has done with that. That is essentially what where is that now? Yes, so that is essentially what the PPP has been any area in terms of what the PPP been doing. As I said, they don't even want the state to control anything. They want to control it themselves. Look, the state has a mechanism to give scholarships, but what do? They go and set up gold scholarships. So they can put their people in position and give whosoever they want scholarship. Lincoln and other people were speaking to the issue. Look at salaries. Look at salaries. If they want to give away resources, you can carry something to Parliament with an objective way of doing this. You can say, look, we have this money to do small project in villages. Let's work out a criteria for all that to happen. And then let's determine here in Parliament with ourselves what they don't want that. Don't tell me about the PPP managing and vibe. They want to go in the areas and give away money to whoever they want to. They want to go man report and call some people, say take some money because some people run across and attack you. But they got 5,000 police and they allow that to happen. How can you have about 5,000 police and army and allow that to happen? It's your inefficiency. You've got some criminals run across, but they should never be allowed to do that in the context of Guyana. So please, for me, there's no question of how the PPP, making any assessment. It is intended for the PPP to have control over the political and economic, socio-economic system in Guyana, and to do so in a fashion that would force Africans to go into their ranks. And that's it.
Yeah. There are reports recently that Indians are beginning to criticize the PPP for giving too much to Africans and so forth. What?
No. David,
yes,
that's always a story made up by the PPP. What are they giving so much to Africans? What are they giving to Africans? The PPP would spread all those kind of rumors all over the place. And don't fool yourself, Indians do criticize, genuinely criticize the PPP. They do, but that doesn't mean they're not going to vote for them.
Yeah.
Because the worst possible scenario is the PNC. So effectively, when they see the PNC and they say they're going to vote for the PNC, you got to understand there is a nature of what has happened to Guyana over the last 60 years. When the PNC and the PPP start quarreling in the 50s and 60s. Teddy Jagan and Janet Jagan weren't racist. But after Burnham came to office, they got nothing to fight with but racism. How are they going to hold the other party together and make Burnham something of an evil genius or something? And to talk about racism, they had nothing else, nothing. They couldn't keep the party together by just talking about communist ideology, because the Indians by themselves are not particularly communist orientated. So essentially, Indians are more racialized in Ghana than Africans ever were. And that is why when you see at Jagan funeral, it's not because Jagan is particularly good or better, but because Burnham never went out of his way to make Jagan an evil person. Indeed, Africans will feel like if you are doing a wrong thing to Jagan. When you realize that Forbes Burnham nearly left this country because his party, the PNC, refused to want to join the UDP because they're calling them African bourgeoisie. You understand? Cheddy Jagan himself said that it is not either startup and jobs, it's the UDP and that lot in Georgetown, remember?
Yes.
And so nobody in the PPP really demonized Cheddy Jagan. If you had 30 years to do it, no doubt it could have been done. But he was never demonized. Never. As Burnham was demonized to the Indians. And Burnham and the PNC, but I cannot understand that. But PNC had government. They had the government. They can go messing around with it. PPP had nothing. And therefore, to keep their people together, they had to do something. Not that Janet and Cheddy were racist, but they end up creating a whole lot of racists. You would listen, when you listen to him, some educated people, the way they write about Burnham. It's like him Jagan and cast on himself. Yeah. Who was this communist? Not Jagan. You know, if Jagan was a communist, Burnham was a little communist himself, but it was Jagan. It's not Janet Jagan write letter to the Comintern and said that she would deliver Guyana and the entire Caribbean to the communist movement. Who wrote her? You know,
Henry, you said something in passing that Burnham almost left this country because there was difficulty in his followers wanting to join up with John Carter's UDP. Elaborate a little bit on that, because that's new information for a lot of people in this audience. And I will support what you're saying when you finish.
Well, let me tell you how all of that came up. I was working for Dr. Reed, and he came. Let me tell you how I know this, you know. And he came, and something happened. I can't remember the precise issue, but so we were Coffee Ideological College one day. I think Chandy Singh was there running it at the time, but maybe they had graduation. And Dr. Reed came up to me and he says, "Young man, you think I'm a stupid old man, don't you?" So I said, no, sir. Why would I think you're a stupid old man? He said, "Come, let's sit there." And they had some seat in the corner. And he said, "You think I follow the leader all the time, don't you? You think anything the leader say, I go with it?" I said, "I don't know. I don't think so, you know." And he said, "Yes, you do. Yes, you do. But let me tell you a story." And then he told me the story. He said, "That's how you become to have faith in Burnham." He said, for Tooth and Quiet, I might know this if you ask him, because he's been around them times. He said in the first instance, I think that must be in the first election was what? After
57. 57.
57, the first
Yes.
election, or the first time they had a Congress and they said, let's join together. Burnham said, we got to join with these people because remember they had Rudy Kendall and all of these people in New Amsterdam. And Burnham said, we have to join with them. If the PNC themselves are saying things like, we are socialists, those are bourgeois and all sort of thing. And at the end of the day, what I gather from Dr. Reed was that at the end of the day, Burnham said, I am going to pack my bags. I'm going to go off and live in Ghana if y'all don't support this thing at the next Congress. I am gone. I'm gone. And he ended by saying, well, they supported it, and the end speaks for itself. And therefore, that give him confidence in the word of the leader and all that. So, you understand? So effectively, what I'm saying to you, they make Burnham a devil, while Burnham never made Chedi a devil. And the PPP. But you got to understand why it happened. They're not that Chedi and Janet was racist or nothing, but that's what they had.
That's what they had. That's what they had.
That's what they had.
Let me tell you how I come to know that tidbit. I was on a TV program in Washington, D.C. called Carib Nation. And I think I was interviewing somebody and I was talking about that period. And when I came off the program, a couple of hours, I got a call from John Carter, who by then had retired, living in Washington.
Okay.
And he said, David, can you come and have tea with me? We have to discuss something. Long story short, I go, your wife prepared a nice tea and so on. First time having that kind of thing. First time I'm meeting John Carter.
You meet the bourgeoisie.
The bourgeoisie. And he said, you know why I called here? I said, no, Sir John. He said, I called here to tell you that the PNC almost didn't happen because the people in the PNC didn't want to join with the UDP. And he said it's CLR James had come to Guyana giving a lecture.
Yes.
And CLR James brought them together and said, don't you all see what is happening around the Caribbean and the world? And I'm not leaving Guyana until you all decide to come together. That's what John. So there you go. We can corroborate the thing. Yes. So I'm glad the audience can understand emotions. That point that you made there about the PNC and Burnham not in a sense demonizing Jagan, I think is a very, very critical point. Quayana once said in a letter, I think, he may not have said it, I think he said it to me, that Burnham has his own sins, but people are creating sins for Burnham, meaning the PPP in the way in which they've demonized him as a racist. And I heard Nascimento on a program with Freddie Kisu saying Burnham was not a race, and he shocked all of them sitting on the program, and he repeated it. So that piece of analysis there and fact, I think are important for those who are viewing this program. Welcome to Politics 101, and as usual, we try to educate, inform, and in the process to mobilize people in a way that we, at the end of the day, are looking for a solution. Because I know for me, I know for Henry, this thing is not about exchanging the PPP with the PNC. We've been doing that. It's about finally finding a solution to our problem, a political solution, which obviously lies in the change of the system. And I was on a program the other morning, and I warned that, the way PPP supporters are behaving now, as if the PPP would be in power forever, and that if the government changed tomorrow, a lot of pressure would be on the PNC to do exactly what the PPP is doing today. And that will take us nowhere. It will get us nowhere. And so, Henry Jeffrey, talk a little bit about how ethnic societies, what is the thing? The PPP keeps saying the thing that will bring us together is trust. Now we know that's nonsense. What is the thing that will get the factions, get the parties to come to the table and recognize finally there is need for a solution? What is that thing? What is that missing thing?
Power. Every place that this has happened, it has happened as a result of power. If Clinton didn't get involved in Northern Ireland, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Don't the Catholics and them, been fighting for 15 years. If Bill Clinton being egged on by people like Biden and them didn't come together, and given that they were Irish, Irish people, generation kinds of, they brought Clinton on board. And without that, you still had a whole lot of problems. They almost, what's his name that was doing the process there, nearly left, and the coordinator, Baker, I think, I don't know. He nearly walked and left, because even then, 2 years he worked with them, and it's still the thing. It's power. There is always one party who believe that they have an upper hand, and the other party not going to give up just like that. So it is, look what's happening in Israel.
Yeah.
Look what's happening in Israel. I mean, it's the same situation, but what you have, they talk about two-state solution, but the Jews got problem with that too, because states operate today. The state is a new, or go one view, the next time the state join with somebody else to undermine you, and the Jewish people had all these problems over centuries, and so they don't even want to take anything with a two-state solution. They'll have to find a solution one way or another down the road. But effectively, the Americans, I believe, today have sufficient authority to see that this happen. And they said what should happen. And even if whatsoever the outcomes there, the PNC should not be sitting down here like if they think that they can take this thing and run it better than the PPP. They can't. They have not demonstrated that in the past. Indeed, I have about numerous things I can show you for the short period that they were there, what they did. And they have not, in my view, demonstrated that they're going to run anything better that's going to change people's mind. It's not going to be sufficiently, but even if it's marginally better, you're not going to change anybody's mind, because the other man outside making this at different point with the same information. He's going to be out there. The PPP going to be out there, and anything you talk about positive, and take the same facts and talk about it negatively. Yeah? And you won't get nowhere in terms of one Guyana. Look how long we have about here. So, and because you are in this context, you are then forced to want to do things to force the other side to succumb to you. It's what the PPP, where the PPP ended up with all of this. So effectively, I don't think they're not going to do anything better. They're 4 years or 3 years or whatsoever when they were stable in government don't prove it. It does not prove it to me. I know that I can demonstrate that, but I'm not going to go there, because my thing is not to deal or to bring quarrel. My thing is to say, I hope, and that's what my article on Sunday was saying, we must strive for the effective democracy. Even a place like Suriname, you gotta get 2/3 majority before you can become the president. We must strive we must strive to try and get the effective democracy. Not for a 40% group to sit down and believe that it must run the whole country and control all the budget and go one seat and can do what it likes. It's nonsense. It's not Arthur Lewis sit down since 64 and said that's not democracy. And now they call him the father of shared governance. So effectively, that's my position on.
Yeah, Henry, there are two questions I want to ask you. The first, let me ask the easier one first. You got about 1,800 people on this program. Most of them, I imagine, are supporters of the opposition. How do you convince them that if and when the PNC / the opposition get power, that they must work out an arrangement to share power with the PPP? How do you convince them of that?
How do I convince them?
After all the blows that they're taking here by the PPP.
Yeah, but they must see that the Indians take a lot of blows too. They think so anyway. They had 7,000 Indians got knocked out, boss. Christmas. They never forget that. And they were complaining, and you were saying, oh, I want to reform. Everybody knows the sugar industry must be reformed. But I know of nowhere where the state-owned industry and do that. So you must realize that the Indians feel like that too. And the question, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You have to have relatively serious leadership, because I can see this is difficult to sell, because people are not looking. I don't think, and not difficult to sell to Black people at all, because Black people not look African people. They're not looking really. The way you put it just now is like if they're looking to get revenge on the PPP. I don't think they're like that. I don't think that what they want to assure themselves that there is a system in place, and I think the Indians too, that a system in place that guarantees them their rights as a citizen of Guyana on an equitable basis for power and every other thing. That's what they want.
Right.
But it's harder to get the Indians to think that way because of how they were socialized. They were socialized to demonize the PNC. That's how they were socialized for 30 whole generation and more.
Yes. And that was going to be my follow-up question that you already answered there. My follow-up question. Which of the two communities you think it is easier to move in that direction? Because, you know, when you look at wherever this thing has worked, this political solution of sharing power, the initiative had to come from leaders who had to, in a sense, lead the people there. Mandela, for example.
It's the leaders hierarchy. This is a leadership thing. This is not the communities. It's like what's happening to Granger right at this stage. Granger gone there to his communities. He failed. The pressure that he might have been under, nobody, they don't care. Granger failed, and they know they dismiss him. If Granger had maybe led them in another way and do certain things, it might have turned out a different ball game. But it was too obvious a situation what took place. What I am saying to you, it's a leadership thing. And that is why, and it's not only a leadership from the internal standpoint, it's a leadership from external people who got power and can say, look, this, and advice on the way forward. Not forcing anybody, but advice. I think they have already advised on the possible way forward. Is for the people in the PNC not to be objective, not to object to this sort of thing, and leave the PNC with PPP with the argument that you can't manage the country any other way, chief. Therefore, it is best we do it. it is best, even if you get a little thing with the democracy and so on, we are on your side. We are with Exxon, we are with all of these people, and we are in your interest and all of that. And therefore, the democracy will tug along. Janet Jackson used to say, we are doing the best that we could in these circumstances. And when we get to love each other, when trust is built, we will live forever, happy ever after. That is essentially what that essentially what the situation. So it's a leadership thing. It's leaders got to drive this. Like people like you are leaders, you got political party. I know you're trying your best, but you have a political party. You got to try. No one political party can carry this off. None. Or this just going to continue for another 60 years of nonsense.
Yeah. No. I completely agree with you. My understanding, as I am trying more and more to understand Guyanese people, in particular African Guyanese, and moving around and talking to them, is a matter of them trusting their leaders, not to sell them out. In the sense, not to abandon them as African people, that they are open to solutions to our problems. That's my feeling as I move across the country and talk to people, that they don't want to continue to live like this. But they want to make sure that they have leaders there who understand their plight as Africans and who are prepared to represent that plight. Which brings me to this question. I accept your thesis that the Jagans were left with no alternative, that if they were going to survive, they had to demonize Burnham and in that sense socialize Indians in that way. Burnham and the PNC didn't do that, certainly not to the extent as the Jagans did in the Indian community. Do you think that has led the present PNC not to take representation of their ethnic community as an ethnic community seriously? Do you think that that's one of the spin-offs from what they've been a positive thing?
Oh, yes, and they were a minority too. You see, at that point, they were a minority.
Yeah.
And first of all, you gotta understand, nobody that run it, maybe you go abroad and think, but everybody run this country only live under autocracy.
Yeah.
These people ain't know nothing about democracy. When they talk about democracy, it's something like theory to them. They never lived for any consistent time in any democracy. The PPP people, either they live here in some kind of autocracy, the PNC, and when the PNC and the army, well, when you bring the army, you bring in more dictatorship and autocracy. But so effectively, they repeat your question.
My question is that there is a tendency in the current PNC leadership.
All right, got you.
Yes, right.
Got you.
Yeah.
Right, because here the PNC leadership has always been since Burnham time, that we can win over people, and that but you can't be too radical, or else they're not going to vote for you. Yeah. And that still, it's part of the PNC. When Granger go tell the IPADG, go and set up a non-governmental organization to do your thing, right? And what he's saying, in my view, this is in my view, what he's saying, I want to distance myself a little bit from this African thing, because remember, I got to go and get votes from other people. And therefore, if I get tied up in this apology thing, you're going to hear people going to say, you're giving them everything. Whoa, whoa, whoa. It's better you are a non-governmental organization. We are working close together because from a governmental standpoint, we need to do things. But effectively, that has been one of the shortcomings of the African community leaders, not to want to accept their community as having rights in themselves. They are the greatest universalists that we got in this country. They're making other people play their universalism against them. Everything they're doing, they're seeing it like, if you talk about helping small businesses, we are helping all small businesses. They're not seeing that Africans got a different kind of history and maybe women and all that sort of, and you need difference. You realize I'm being told, you don't even take ethnic statistics by the bureau anymore. How can you live in a society where everybody fighting one another and you don't know what people really want, what they are? They don't want to differentiate things by ethnicity. That's nonsense. People got different history. You have to go there. If you want to do small business, I said they had an editor in the establishment about small. I didn't even read it because I know it's going to be the same universalist nonsense. What I'm saying to you, you have to realize that not only ethnicity, but other things like women, Amerindians, and all of that. You got to look at all this differently. And you got to allow their communities to have an input into it because they don't trust you in the first place. And you don't get people to trust you by coming beating down their head and bribing some people in their communities. And they come to trust you even less. Because they see your hand, you show your hands. So effectively, yes, I agree that there's been a big problem in the African society because they are more inclined to be universalistic. The PPP might appear to you universalistic, but they know how to do things to get resources to the other side. What? But no, but and that is why they want to control everything the government are doing, every single thing.
Every single thing. Talking about not seeing their ethnic constituency for what it is. We have this latest thing of a new Black organization launched at Rahman Park. In the audience, PPP ministers. What do you make of that, Henry Jeffrey?
Well, what could you think? It's just part of the process of trying to get largely going to be peripheral people and people that needs things. They will get them and say, come together and let us think. And we can show the world we are a true multi-ethnic society and all that nonsense. David, I am not even blaming them for trying because try as you must. But the people they are talking to, the people like the Americans then they are talking to already know it's foolishness they're doing. Because if you got the state resources that you can give to who you like, I might go and win an election in America.
Right.
You know what I mean? A friend tell me that. He said, this is nonsense. People know, because if you can just distribute the state resources you want and get buying votes all over the place, I may win an election in America. So it's wrong. And that is why they don't want to hear about campaign financing and all those things. They want to spend, they want to use up government money and do that sort of thing. So I'm not surprised at that. It will go nowhere. They will try their best to try to support it and undermine things as the elections are coming and all of that. But it would go absolutely nowhere because people see their hand. It's not there that they're winning support, like because people want to be there. It's not time of cherry dragon. This is time of ethnic dominance, and people are seeing it. It's not the same PPP. of jargon that you're seeing today. It is a PPP that now wants to dominate the political sphere. So I don't think I have not paid much mind to the group and its. No, I have not paid much mind.
You've not paid much attention to it, Henry
Well,
Jeffrey.
I know it's there. I
Is
know
there?
it was going to happen. I know it's and they will, because they have other things. I mean, they got our little baby groups in our sort of community. They can't just lose them like that. So effectively, they're gonna have to try and do something with them, because how that will look. So I never see that as something is for you. It is for the opposition now to do what they have not done for all the time they've been. It's to have an education campaign about what's going on, and a strong education campaign on the ground. Apart, not no racist campaign to racialize nobody, because all of them over time has been messing around with that on the bottom house, and so on. But to show people what the future can look like in a properly organized democratic society, not this thing that we are going on here with. And I think that they need to very much go out there and remember, from 2006, since even before that, the people and see only mobilize the people at election time.
Yeah.
Yes, man, I do what the magic. He almost break up the whole PhD story. And essentially, the party structures and things that Burnham used to spend a whole lot of time on was almost left dormant. And you know why that was? Because Corbyn and his friends, they had their own way of going after the PNC. And by the way, they succeeded. They succeeded. They succeeded. The PPP lost the election in 2011. They lost the 2011 election in 2015. And they possibly lost this one too. The PPP has not won an election since Janet Jagan.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you have to, they have to go out there with a education campaign. They have not done so because they had their own way of dealing with the PPP and so on, and they did win. It's just that the one opportunity they had, they tried to prolong. They think they could have prolonged that kind of winning, that it didn't turn out that way. But you have to go there, and you have to be committed to a equitable society in an effective democracy that give the Amerindian, but perhaps the poorest people in Guyana. They are the poorest people in Guyana. They should have and they are 10%. They should have a seat at the table too. You should want to walk from that. We live in different times. And don't fool yourself. Look what's happening in America with Trump and his 40%. Mm-hmm. When you got 40% of the votes, people behind you, the other party in deep trouble, and America is more of a multi-ethnic society, so they might get away with it. But when you got two ethnic groups, it's problems. And one get 40%. Look what's happening in America. So take heed. Last week too, there was people were circulating a thing from Switzerland. Somebody circulated a thing about Switzerland and how they ain't got any presidents there and all of that. You got presidency and people rotated. That is the new system for the new world. That is foolishness. That will turn out to be the new system for the new world. That you got a presidency and people rotate it, and you go back to elections and things like that.
Jeffrey, let me ask you this question because, of course, you are better placed than many of us to really deal with it. There's no secret that there are problems in the PNC, and there's a lot of challenge to Aubrey Norton's leadership from within the PNC. From what you understand of party politics, PNC politics, PPP politics, is that inevitable? Was that challenge? Is that challenge to Norton? Or the non-cooperation with Norton, was it inevitable?
First of all, if we go back to your editorial.
Yes.
Here the editorial have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, you said, yeah. All of the country badly needs a good opposition.
Yes.
What they're telling you, the country don't have a good opposition.
Right.
And they move on, they say nothing else.
Right.
That is what I tell you about. That they're criticizing the PNC. They need they're in all the things they're saying. That's all they needed to say, and they move and they proceeded down the road. Let me ask you something. You know, I just ask people when they tell me about Aubrey Norton. I know Aubrey a long time. And Aubrey is when I become a minister, he's the first person I write a letter against. Forced, I got the letter up to know with something with Ministry of Housing or something. So I know Aubrey a long time ago. But you tell me, one thing that Barrett Jagdew got Granger to do that Granger didn't want to do during the time when he was in office. Mm-hmm. Tell me that. Mm-hmm. Tell me. These are make-up stories. And when you ask people, well, what you want Aubrey to do, they're not so certain. They're just saying he's not the right person. You know, maybe he's be a Bamba Mali. All these stupidness. But when was Granger time? I mean, people telling me Granger, you can't even get Granger near Bamba Mali. No, you got a person. You know, that's I mean, whatever did the thing. When Granger got into office, first thing the PNC did, they took away the deputy speakership that has traditionally gone to the opposition. That's not what they did. They take it, they give word to Debbie and Trotman. I mean, what could Jagdew do? Nothing. They wake up the next morning, they decide to give themselves 50% increase. What could Jagdew do? Nothing. They decide to knock off something, almost 1,000 Indians. What could Jagdew do? Nothing. It's the nature of the system that allows the person in power to do this thing. They decided, this is unfathomable. Their supportive political trade union, they decided they're not going to have collective bargaining with it. The public service union has been traditionally more or less support. You think they went on any collective bargaining with the public service union? They got none. They do just what the people used to do. Give them some broad-based increases and all that. So, you know, essentially, people say these things about the opposition, but ask them what they want Norton to do, means or what they want them to do, given the context of the society. All he can do is come up and quarrel and talk. That's what Jagdew used to do, talk, cuss up, and so on, and great. If you do that, great. But he was not able to stop anybody until the powers that we wanted to get rid of Granger and call and do what we call regime change 101, call the opposition. First thing you want to change your regime, get the opposition on your side. And they were waiting. So don't. So, I mean, I want somebody really tell me what you want Aubrey to do. You want him to go on the street. It's only black people you can bring on the street because it's the nature of the society. Indians don't go on the street, period. And half of them working in the public service, so now with the people might knock off more of them. Now we got to be careful here, and therefore I don't buy. I have not bought this notion that Aubrey's doing that. Indeed, look what they're all over the country doing work and things. Look up Jack, and they thought them perhaps thought that they got a runaway thing with this with the local government. Look what happened to them. And I think the masses of people know that, and people must. He won election, and therefore he should be supported until you have a proper election. And whensoever, if you wish, you vote him out, but don't there attacking people all over the place, because I myself ain't see nobody much better. Well, I'm saying I haven't seen anybody particularly better. But that's my opinion.
Yeah. Henry Jeffrey here, as usual, saying it as he sees it. Henry, thanks again for coming through, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right, David. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, as usual, we bring you information, we bring you analysis, and as some of you are saying, there are things that you've learned tonight, some critique of the political party, the political system, and I particularly like that thing of where the PNC is now, of not recognizing its constituency as a constituency with rights as an ethnic community. I move around this country and I talk to people, and I feel that burden because people, in a sense, are looking to people like myself to represent the African Guyanese as a community with rights of their own, problems of their own, issues of their own, and that the PNC as a party, somehow or the other, is not able to do that, to pivot and to do that, even at a time when Black people are being attacked as Black people. It is very difficult for the party that they voted for to really do that. And somebody was asking me, I think a PNC person was asking me a few days ago, if I feel burdened sometimes of having to carry that mantle of defending African people as African people. And I think I gave some answer, but I'm hoping that the PNC comes to an understanding that you don't have to do it forever, but it's at this time African people need defending and protecting, because they're under attack as Black people. I was speaking to a PNC leader a couple of days ago, and that person was telling me that there are things that I can say, there are things that the WPA can say that the PNC can't say, partly because the PNC has to get those crossover votes. And I said to that leader, but the WPA also, people like myself, we also have to get crossover votes. The crossover is from Africans who have lost faith in us as leaders. We have to work on them to get them to cross over and to come into the political process. So you're looking for Indian crossover votes and not recognizing that they're African crossover votes that you need to get. And that is that they're African people who feel that the political parties are not representing them as African people. It doesn't mean that you have to be an African party. Yes, you're going to get some cussing that you're racist and all that kind of stuff and all of that. I get that every day, and I'm prepared to take that blows, right? And I'm not about splitting Black people at this time. I'm very clear about that in my mind. Yes, there may be some goodwill for people like myself, and thanks for that. But I'm not about splitting the opposition. And that is why I think that our major party has to really do serious introspection about where our struggle is and the choices the party has to make now. One, make choices now so that you don't have to make that choices tomorrow. Because nothing is static. Nothing is stagnant. Time moves on. And we take a stand today. As Flash Gordon always remind me, I say, if I have to stand alone, I'm not selling the dignity of Africans for crossover votes. So we need crossover votes, but we also need African votes. We keep forgetting that. We take for granted the African vote and go after crossover vote. We need crossover vote, but we also need African votes to win. We need crossover votes to win, but we need Black people votes to win. And that is what I try to tell my fellow opposition people. When you leave your coop open and gone after somebody else's chicken, you chicken, they're going to go away. And that is the challenge we face as leaders. The struggle goes on. The struggle goes on. We're going to get it right. We've got to get it right. But people like you who come on to these programs and are exposed to a certain kind of analysis, whisper in your leaders' ears and tell them politics is not linear. Politics is not one-dimensional. It's multidimensional. It's multidimensional. There are people who tell me every day, oh, you know, a man called me abusing yesterday. Well, he called Kedaki asking for me. Well, when am I going to call out Aubrey Norton? When am I going to call out these boys who were at President Ali's story? Eric Phillips and Van West Charles and them, you know? And I know I feel that burden sometimes, but I don't think this is the time to call out our fellow leaders. It doesn't mean that I agree with what they're doing. It doesn't mean that I don't think they ought to be doing better. All of us ought to be doing better. All of us. But I think the politics of division is not the politics for this time. We have to find common ground. We have to find those things that all of us agree on, all the factions in the PNC and all the factions outside of the PNC. We first of all have to set an example about what we want this country to look like. And so I deliberately asked that question of Dr. Jeffrey at the end. It's about leadership also. Not only about leadership, but it's about leadership also. Whisper to your leaders, those who you all consider to be leaders. I get my messages. I get people who support me, support the WPA. They whisper to us. Sometimes they shout at us. Sometimes they quarrel with me. Dr. Hines, you're too soft and so-and-so person and so on. Give those messages also to the leaders. All of us are working in the same community, the opposition community. And like I said, I'm not about to divide. I'm not about to split anything. Now is not the time for that. Our country is going down the tube under the PPP. And we have to stop it. And we cannot stop it when we are fragmented. We cannot stop it when we are fragmented. Note I'm using the word fragmented rather than divided. And I'm deliberately doing so. We have different views. We are not a monolith. But those fragments can come together and work on the things that we ought to be working on. It's a minor shame that we don't have an all opposition group. We don't. When we were challenging Burnham and the PNC, there were all kinds of all opposition groups. There was a committee in defense of democracy in 1978. There was the Citizens Committee of 1978. There were the 4 unions, which became the 6 unions, which became FITOG. There was the PCD. There always was an all opposition group. When you're up against dictatorship, opposition groups put their differences aside and work on a common front, as they used to call it in those days. We don't have a joint opposition political party groups. We don't. And we are up against perhaps the most dictatorial government. I have to say that I've been trying, the WP has been trying to get such a grouping going. We've been working over time. There is no forum where the AFC and the PNC and the WPA and whoever else are sitting down. There is none. Please tell your leaders, all of them, that we can't fight against a vicious dictatorship when we are as fragmented, when the fragments are colliding with each other rather than coming together. Even to come together to sit down once a month, we ought to be doing more than that. We ought to be meeting more often than that. So, all is not lost. It will never be lost. But we have to work harder at the leadership level. Tomorrow night, we're going to have it Padaji here. It Padaji here tomorrow night. Until then, I love you all. Always, always love.